What up, dog? Chris checking in from the Unrelenting Brush with you today. I've got a really exciting video for you today. I've not done a tuition in a good long while. I've certainly not done one of this size. Today I'm going to talk you through and show you a bit of how I painted the Crimson Fist half of the new Leviathan box set in about 12 hours. Big slog, not everyone's got time to sit down for 12 hours to paint, but hopefully some of the steps you'll watch in this video will help you develop, speed up, try something new, get some new results from your models. Either way, I hope you enjoy the content. Thank you very much. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that cringy nonsense. Sick, wicked, bad. Thank you. So here's our Space Marines, all good and ready to rock. So I started out with priming them Colourforge matte black. I then gave them a zenithal from top down to the sides with Tempest blue, also from Colourforge. What that means is I held the model upright and from a 90 to 45 degree angle I sprayed them with the Tempest blue. This means that the Colourforge matte black will be on the underside and give us some shading, and the Tempest blue hit the sides, the fronts, the backs and the tops that we need them to. Here's our tester, Hovan I'll call him. Absolute mad lad. Relatively happy with how he came out. I really like the blue, I like the silver details, I like the leather, I like the base. Not sure about the gun, not sure about the amount of sponging I did, and I think the fist is a little bit dull. I think there needs to be a brighter red. But overall I'm happy with him. He was able to be done really quick, and I want to convey that across into this army, so I'll keep him in eyeline when I'm painting these models. So I'm going to break this project down into 3 steps in regards to painting. The first one is going to be base layers that aren't metallic. From there we'll go on to transfers and oil washes, and then the last step will be filling in the remaining base colours of metallics, lenses, final details, stuff like that. So let's get going. So if you're one of these painters who doesn't have an airbrush and instantly sees this and thinks, right, I'm not watching this video anymore, please refrain. I'm doing a little bit of airbrushing here using a Latop blue just to give a top-down zenithal highlight. Now, you don't need to do this at all. This is purely optional. I did this because I wanted to have a little bit of a nicer blue transition, because I find this dark blue base layer to be quite hard to highlight up without it looking too stark. So using an airbrush really helps with this. Alternatively, you can use a spray can if you've got a lighter blue than the Tempest blue that we've got. Just do a really light dusting over the top of it. Or you just don't have to do it. Instead of this, you can do some traditional old school edge highlights, or you can just leave it as is. Maybe tone down the oil wash or focus on the highlights elsewhere. Either way, this is purely optional. This is not going to change the outcome drastically. So as you can see, I am focusing from the top down. I'm getting bits like the helmets, the shoulder pads, the back of the legs, the knees, the top of the fists, the rear of the back armor plate. This is just to pop a little bit more colour on there and to hopefully brighten up that dark blue, because by the time we put an oil wash on there it will look almost black. So any blue we can add to that now, the better. So here we have the Marines all airbrushed up. Again, I reinforce this is purely optional. I did it because I have the facilities and I just wanted to add a slightly brighter blue. It's given a really nice faded transition from the dark blue to a kind of more babyish blue without being too powerful. This will, again, hopefully mean that the black oil wash will stop the whole thing from turning black because of how dark that blue initially is. So with that done, if I hold it up next to our tester, you'll see just how little of a difference that blue is going to make by the time we've varnished and transferred and oil washed. It'll be barely noticeable. So again, please don't feel like you have to do that. With that in mind, it's time to go on to the really boring bit. It's time to pick up our brushes, grab a load of base paints. We're going to focus on ammo pouches, tabards, non-metallic surfaces. So let's get painting. So starting off with our pouches, straps and such, we're going to go in with scale colours brown leather. Really nice paint, beautiful range, really nice matte finish. They are quite thick though, so you do need to thin them down a good chunk. Wet palette I do recommend for this. And yeah, sadly this is one of the boring jobs. This is going through each Marine, painting their ammo pouches, their straps. If they've got straps around their bolters, don't forget those. I did on a couple. Don't forget the Phobos Lieutenant's got a few straps here and there. So yeah, just go across each model, fill these colours in, and through the power of magic, let's speed this up a little bit. So I love these models, I think they're amazing. I love the kind of stripped back minimalist details they have on them. Some of the later Marines have had a lot of pouches, a lot of details, a lot of excess kind of gubbins and webbing and stuff, which don't get me wrong is amazing and cool. but especially if this is going to be a launch box, I don't think you want to overdo it, considering the Tyranids already have quite a lot of detail on them. So painting these pouches with a nice warm brown, like brown leather from Scale Colour, means we get a really nice contrasting, warm, rich, bright brown against the dark blue that we've got. Because we won't get many colours on these, we'll get the blue, we'll get the red fist, so we need to try and find where those other colours can be. So these pouches are a great, great example of that. Up next is one of the few more colours we've got to do on the armour. This is the black of the undersuit and the black carapace, and the webbing in between the armours. So I use Black Legion for this. I use Black Legion for a lot of stuff. I find it to be incredibly useful for painting black over almost anything. So this is going between the legs, the arms, on the underside of his butt cheeks, and anywhere you want to be black. So dead easy, you don't need to thin it down, don't need to put it on the palette, load a brush up, pop it in there, one layer will do it, leave it to dry. Again, go through each marine, looking over them, see where these are. Don't forget in between the arms where they're holding the gun out in front of them. And go from there. So again, Black Legion is fantastic. I use it for basically repriming black over any colour, white, blue, red, whatever, depends on what I'm painting. So you're probably wondering why we're not doing this on the gun cases, because they're predominantly black for Crimson Fists. I tend to do those at the end of the painting session, because when we've done the metallics and stuff, we're just going to go over those and scuff them up, which, don't get me wrong, is fine if you want to do that. One of the important bits about how I paint stuff is knowing when you can afford to be messy, and knowing when not to paint. This is definitely one of those times where we could be messy, but we won't. We'll just wait until the very, very end. Yep, don't forget the Terminators. They've got a few little bits on there as well. The characters have them too. The Phobos Lieutenant's got some on his chest as well, where he's got the kind of ribbed armour underneath his blue. There we go. Up next, everyone's favourite, Purity Seals. I'm using Thar Brown from Scale Colour. Likewise, similar to brown leather, it is quite thick, so you do need to thin it down a fair bit and give it a couple of coats. If you want to use Xandri Dust or Rakov Flesh or any kind of pallid bonish colour, absolutely fine, crack on. You will, and I repeat, you will miss Purity Seals. I got to the end of this project and found 2 on these marines that I missed, so don't stress. Go over each marine, do as many as you can. This is, again, one of the not fun bits of this job, but once they're done, they're that much needed splash of colour. And yeah, sadly, if you paint Space Marines, you're going to have to paint some Purity Seals. Now you'll notice the Dreadnought's got some Purity Seals on him as well, but he's also got these little etched banner details on there. I tend to paint those a bone or a white colour, so do those too. I think the Stern Guard have a couple on them, as did the Terminator Captain. So, yep, go mad. If you want to paint however you want to paint them, go absolutely hog. Part of this video is to show you the process and the steps of how I paint to get things done in a quick time. So maybe if you don't agree with the paints being used or the techniques, look at the practice, look at how it's planned out and how I organise what's being painted and when. Maybe you'll take something away from that. Either way, I hope you're having a good time. Time for my favourite, some Pro Acryl Bold Pyro Red. Pro Acryl from Monument Hobbies are probably the paint range on the market at the minute. I've yet to find something they can't do. They're beautifully matte, they're thin, they go through an airbrush beautifully, you can thin them down more if you need to, they go on in a layer or two. If you've yet to try them, grab a couple of their paints, even their metallics are absolutely brilliant. So if you're looking for a new colour or to replace a colour, try a Pro Acryl and take a for a spin, I guarantee you'll be impressed. So, the red, Crimson Fists. I'm painting red on my left hand, so remember it is their left hand that needs the red on. Because you don't want to get halfway through this and realise you've done it wrong, because it'll just be a pain in the arse to tidy. So on the wet palette, a little bit of water, the left hand gets painted red. Now for their veterans and characters and such, they get both their hands red because they've gone through the trials and slain the dragons and other lore videos you can get from someone who knows a lot more than I do. But yes, a couple of thin coats of this on that left hand, 2 for the Stern Guard and the characters, and we are away. You can also do this on the Purity Seals wax prints. I think I realised halfway through and then started going back and doing that, but yeah, do that now and save yourself some time. If you're looking for a Citadel equivalent to this, you could go for Evil Sun Scarlet or Mephiston Red. But again, I can't stress it enough, if you've not tried Pro Acrylic paints yet, get yourself one ordered, even if it's just for a black or a brown or a bone colour. You will not be upset, they are absolutely brilliant. Take them for a spin. I do bloody love painting red. Up next, we've got another Pro Acrylic paint called Warm Grey. Lovely, lovely colour. We are going to use this for the tabards, which are on the Stern Guard, their roby type bits, and the cape of the Terminator Captain. Really nice neutral colour. You can use this on cloth and stuff just to add a splash of colour without taking away from the blue or the red. So that's why I chose grey. It's also not too grey that it's going to blend in too much with the base and we're going to lose it. It means that when we apply our weathering powders to the bottom of the cape, it's going to look great. Up next, an old favourite, Mechanica Standard Grey. This is going to be used on the Crux Terminatus of the Terminators. So they've got one on their shoulder, very important, and they've got one similar looking icon on their knee, so we're going to do that the same too. Don't forget, it's not just the Terminators, it's the Terminator Captain and your Librarian too. Anybody in Terminator armour should have a Crux. Right, guys and gal then, time for some transfers. So, up to this step, all I've done off film is give these guys a gloss varnish. You can do it by hand, you can do it by spray can, you can do it by airbrush, however you choose to do it is up to you. Give it plenty of time to dry, because the last thing you want is this to be wet when you hit it with the transfer solution. So everyone's been wholly covered in a very thin layer of gloss varnish. This is to help our transfers adhere smoothly. Now, if you've never used transfers before, it's nowhere near as scary as it's made out to be by some people. You need some clean water, you need a sharp knife, you need your transfers, and you need a couple of pots called Microset and Microsol. What we're going to do first is wet our transfers, so I've cut them onto our table. I'm going to wet the single ones with a drop of water just off my finger to make sure it goes on top and below the transfer. We're then going to give those about 20-30 seconds to dry. At that point the transfer should be malleable and free to come off the paper. If you've got larger strips of transfers like these ones, pick them up, drop them in the water, take them out. As you can see, they adhere to wet fingers quite nicely. Now, transfers are amazing. I love them, I love everything about them. They are hard work sometimes, but they are well worth it. I prefer them infinitely over etched or sculpted details. They just have a nicer finish, and yeah, they're just great. Right, Microset, the blue stuff. What you do is you apply that on the surface where the transfer is going. In this case, it's going to be some shoulder pads. Now, sticking a round transfer onto a round shoulder pad is one of the worst things you can do, but we are going to get through it together. So, get a long, thin brush. Make sure your gloss is dry. Wet your surface with the Microset. Then very gently wiggle your transfers to see if they're free. Once they start moving off the paper, that means they're ready. If the paper's too wet, gently move the whole sheet with your finger just to get it away from the water. If it's too wet, it'll slide all over the place. So apply the Microset to your surface. Use your brush to gently go underneath the transfer and pick it up. As such, and then gently place it where you want it to go. Trying to get these centrals one thing, trying to get them flats another thing. But I assure you, it's well worth the effort. Once you've got your transfer where you want it, which is about there, apparently not, wiggle wiggle. Once you've got it into position, and I cannot stress this enough, leave it alone. Put it down, put the model down, put it on the other side of the room, have nothing to do with it for about half an hour, an hour. This is because the more you look at it, you'll see it won't settle immediately, you'll then poke it. You poke it, it moves, it tears, you get upset, the whole project goes in the bin, you go and pick up fishing. So, get your transfers where you want them. So most cases for this project it's one on either shoulder pad. So the, I don't know what it is now, Elite icon on the right shoulder pad and the chapter icon on the left. These are not going to sit flat immediately. These transfers are wonderful, I love them, but they're very, very stiff and very thick. which is good for one thing because it means they don't tear and they're quite easy to move around without worrying about slipping, tearing, folding. But it does mean it takes some doing to get them to stick where you need them to be. So once you've got the transfer where you want it, pop it down, leave it alone. Don't touch it with your brush, let it dry. I've got some little scripture bits which I'm currently doing off film because I'm not very good at this. I'm going to put those on a few legs, on some arms and stuff. And provided you keep the brush wet and the surface wet, you can move that transfer wherever you want to put it. So as you can see, that little bit of script on the leg there, perfect, done, leave it well enough alone. I'm going to put that model out of sight, out of mind, and go on to the next one. Now, vehicles and dreadnoughts are a different story. These go on absolutely beautifully. So going onto a flat surface is infinitely easier than going onto a smooth, round surface. You literally put it where you want it, apply the micro set over it, position it where you want it, done. We can then apply the second solution later on, and that'll be pretty much done. Sadly, this won't be the case with the Space Marines, but we'll go back to those in a minute. I decided at this point that I'm going to spend most of the evening putting transfers on this dreadnought and getting my hand in the way of the camera. So transfers are amazing because they do a number of things. They designate what the model is, who it belongs to, what faction it's a part of. But I love dreadnoughts because you can go wild with the heraldry on them. I wanted to put a load of honour markings and venerations on this dreadnought. Maybe he was commended by Guilliman on the Indomitus Crusade. Maybe Pedro Cantor gave him a pat on the head and said he was a good boy and gave him a sticker. So yeah, you've got all these beautiful big flat surfaces you can work with. So if you've got transfers and you want to practice, use a dreadnought or a vehicle or a tank or anything like that. So my Crimson Fist transfers are from Etsy. They're from a place called Forgotten Chapters. I'll try and provide a link somewhere for you to go and have a look. But yeah, their transfer selection is great. These are fantastic, if a bit stiff, but it's nothing that our transfer solution can't work with. So there we've got a few transfers down on our Dread. Looks awesome already. But again, I decided, hang on a minute, I can see some spare real estate, and slapped a load of transfers on him. So we're just going to speed it up a bit. Another great thing about vehicles and transfers is that you can group transfers up. These look great, they look very full of character, they tell a story, they really make that kind of uniqueness of the model stand forward. So on this, it's got the tellings of his battles and his victories across the campaign and a personal commendation from Pedro Cantor. We're going to stick some battle honours on there as well. Again, you can really just go whole hog with this if you want to. And if you've got the real estate and you don't overdo it and you want to practice with transfers, this is the time to do it. Here I'm going through my purple transfer folder, which is full of transfer sheets, seeing if there's anything else I can find that will apply. So the previous transfer sheets from Indomitus, really good. If you've got generic Space Marine transfers, again, they've normally got little bits of scripture and shields on. Those are great for adding stuff. So yeah, again, come up with your own, put a bunch of transfers together, tell the story you want to tell. Why the bloody hell not? Right, I put it off for long enough, it's time to put some transfers on some Space Marines. So, chapter icon on the left shoulder, battle formation on the right, any extras, you can do squad markings on knee pads or legs, go from there. Again, micro set on the surface, apply your transfer, center it, get it where you want it, leave it alone. Once you've left these to dry for about 30 minutes to an hour, apply a layer of micro sol, which is the red solution. Now sadly this is going to take 2 or 3 goes, so you need to apply the micro sol, leave it to dry. It doesn't take as long as the set, thankfully. Go back to it, reapply, dry, reapply, dry, reapply. They will eventually sit flat, and you can push them flat with the end of a soft dry brush. Right, about 2 hours later, everything has got their transfers on flat and settled. So as you can see, my Dreadnought is looking suitably flash. I put transfers over drilled and scratch battle damage, which I did before I primed. Don't worry about that, because we're simply going to paint over those transfers to tie them into the battle damage. Yeah, really happy with him. Terminator Captain Lord's got some nice iconography on his shields. He's got his transfers on, his Crimson Fist transfer. Capes are always funny to me because I hate painting them, and normally if I can stick a transfer on I will. So boom, there you go, deal with it. If you don't like it, get out. Terminators, you didn't need to do a lot with those, just the chapter icon on the shoulder. You could have put one on the fist, but I like a red fist, and some iconography, not iconography, line work and font. I can't remember, calligraphy or something. Font on his leg. Yes, and then our Stern Guard and our Pyre Blasters all have the 2 transfers on. They're all now sitting nice and flat. I'll say it again, transfers are just the best. Take your sculpted shoulder pads and etched details and do away with them. Once you learn how to put a transfer on a Space Marine shoulder pad, they are an absolute game changer for your hobby arsenal. So put up with the curved shoulder pads, get them sitting flat, deal with the creases if they come, take care of them, weather over them, whatever. Because once you can put 40 transfers on 20 Space Marines, there is nothing you can't do with those transfers going forward. They will up your game massively. Right, this means step 1 is pretty much done. We're almost even halfway through step 2. Here's the micro sol. Here's the red one you put on after the blue one's completely dried. So again, 1 layer of the micro set, which is blue. Put the transfer on, leave it alone, let it dry. Apply the micro sol. Let it dry. Apply another layer, let it dry. Apply another layer. Smooth it out with a long thin brush, something like a wash brush or a shade brush. It soaks up the excess moisture left over from the micro sol and helps it sit flat with the creases. So push from the center of the transfer out, you'll be fine. Right, I had my lunch. The next step is to tie those transfers in with our models. So we're going to do that with some Cantor Blue. Again, this is the closest paint to the Tempest Blue spray that we used. So all we're going to do is apply this very gently with a sponge over our transfers to make it look like the paint's been chipped away and worn into the armour during battle. So a little bit of foam sponge, ideally that's not covered in dog hair. Be gone, Thread of Doom. Then apply it to your sponge, a little bit more than that, don't be tight. There we go. Dab it onto your palette or in your hand or some tissue paper to get the worst of it off. And then all we're going to do is test it on a hand to make sure it's not too much. That's just about perfect. Very, very gently dab this onto our transfers. You don't want to overdo it and wreck the transfer and make all that waste of time. You just want to do it so it ties into the armour sitting beneath the transfer. Because again, they are Space Marines, they don't have pristine armour for long, and these are Crimson Fists, so they basically get chucked into gravel as soon as they can. Do this across all the models and all the transfers as you go. Up next, we're going to do some highlighting with a Leviathan blue. So this is the colour we used earlier to airbrush. Again, if you don't want to, don't come at me. So what we're going to do with this is apply it with a sponge gently over areas where we think that the wear and tear will be on the armour. So just as we did before, use a sponge. I'm using the same side that had the Cantor blue and that we just used because it'll mix together and give a nice rough, consistently inconsistent colour, if that makes sense. And then thinking about where this is going to go, so think about where a Space Marine is going to take most of the flak. It's going to be on his gorget, on the corners of his shoulder pads, on his hands, his arms, his elbows, his knees. So think about where the paint's going to chip. Sharpest edges, areas with the most contact, and very, very gently dab this on. You might not notice it very much because of the gloss varnish that we had applied before our transfers. But don't worry, this will show through in the end. And if you want it to be stronger, you can always add more once we've finished our matte varnishing step in a bit. There we go. Now, do that across all of them again. Now with Big Lad, you're going to be a little bit more heavy-handed with this. Think about all those edges, those nice clean lines, how angular he is. You can drag the sponge down to get a little bit more further colour onto there. Try and be careful of the bits we've base coated that aren't transferred up, so the red bits, the purity seals, so on and so forth. If we do get paint on them, do not stress. There is nothing we cannot fix. Don't worry, it'll be reaped. And again, ensure you get this sporadically on all the corners and edges. Grab the transfers every now and again just to make it look like flicks of highlighted paint. Keep going until you are happy. Less is more. It is far easier to put more on than it is to take some off, so keep that in mind. Right, our last bit of weathering before we get to our oil wash is right outside. Similar way, we're going to sponge it on, but we're going to do it sparingly and sporadically. We want to tie it into the highlights we've done, but we don't want to take away from them. So again, fob off the old blue sponge. We don't need that anymore. Get gone. Get some fresh-ish sponge. Again, hairless ideally. And then really sparingly, maybe do a couple of dabs on one side of the model and then one on the other. Just think about, again, where this is going to be, where it's going to catch the eye the most, but don't take away from the blue work we've just done. Less is most definitely more. With the Dreadnought, similar as before, think about where you want to apply it. You can be a little bit more heavy-handed with it, but again, you don't want to take away from the work we've done. I'm going to build it up around those bits of damage, so I've got a scratch in the shoulder there. I've got a few bullet holes in the front of him, some scratches down his leg armour where Hormigants and Gene Stealers have tried to get to the tasty treats inside. So again, apply it not liberally, but think about where it's going to be more prominent. So, we're almost at the end of Phase 2. Everyone's transferred, everyone's sponge weathered, everyone's looking great. So now's the time to go over your models, think about any bits you may have missed. If you've missed any purity seals and stuff, we want to do that before we apply this oil wash. Again, if you get to 99% done and find something you've not painted, do not stress, paint it. No one's going to care. So yep, all we're going to do now is line up our boys, make sure everything's dry as it needs to be. Then we're going to apply a gloss varnish again over them as we did before. We're not going to paint faces and stuff before we do this because we don't want to get those all oil washed up. It won't make sense. So now's the chance to get everyone glossed up, and here we are, all ready to go. So again, you can use a spray can. I've got a spray can that's really good. You can use an airbrush, you can do it by hand, it just takes a bit longer. So get everyone all nice and glossed up. This protects and seals your transfers in, and it also means that the oil wash will be able to flow nicely thanks to the surface reduction from the gloss varnish. So we're going to use Winton oil colour, Winsor & Newton's black. It's lovely. If you haven't used these before, exercise caution. They do involve spirits and chemicals, so if you've got breathing conditions or lung problems, maybe get someone to help you with this, or have plenty of windows open and good ventilation. So we're going to scrape off a little bit of the black, and then I'm going to be cheeky and add some burnt umber, which is their brown. Again, lovely. Scrape off a little bit into my little dish here, so about half and half, maybe a little bit more black. Tighten those up, put them away. You can't spill or stand on anything that's put away, I always say. Now we're going to take our odorless thinner from a company I can't pronounce at the minute because I can't read the label. And we're going to use a pipette. You can get these off Amazon, you can get like 100 for a $5, so definitely get those. It's a lot easier and less messy than pouring spirits everywhere. Load up the pipette. I do 2 pipettes full into the equivalent of oil that we've got in the dish, so pop that into there, do another one. Again, too thin is better than too thick. You can always add more if you need to. Then, using a knackered old artificial brush, I've got an old shade brush from Citadel's artificial range, give it a good mix. You want to really make sure those oils dissipate into that spirit, because there's nothing worse when you're trying to oil paint something and a big blob of neat oil gets on there and it just becomes a pain to clean up. So give it a good mix until it's nice and thin like a wash. Test it on the side of the pan to see if it runs down like dirty milk. If it stays, it's too thick. If you can't see it, it's too thin, so play about. Again, if you've not used oils before, I thoroughly recommend them. They're really, really fun. They're a really, really great alternative to pin washing and lime washing. You can pin wash with these if you want to. It's boring and I don't like it. So all I do is keep this nice and thin and then apply an all-over wash. And then I tidy up at the end with some white spirits. So here's our glossy boy. We gently dab that over and you'll see it flow into all those lovely nooks and crannies thanks to the gloss varnish we've applied. The trick is to get nice and even coverage all over. And we're going to do this over everybody, every single surface we can. And again, the aim of this is to flow into those recesses, darken them down with a nice oil finish. And then once we've let it dry for a little bit, we'll take most of it away with a sponge with some spirits on. So let's crack on. So it looks very mucky and murky. It looks like we've undone a lot of good work, but trust me, we haven't. It's fine. All over everything, even the cloak. It's going to be a unifying kind of factor that's going to take everything together. The dreadnought, again, similarly, whack it wherever you can. If you don't put it on the flat surfaces, they'll stay quite bright, which, you know, is fine if that's what you want to do. But I've got a lot of details in those that I want to get filled, a lot of battle damage I've put time into, so we'll just apply that. And again, you can always take some off with the sponge and some spirits as you go. So here we have our oiled boys. The ones we started with are going to be drying nicely. So oil dries take forever to dry, but we don't want them to fully dry, because if we do, that's it, game over, start again, pick up a new hobby, maybe golf. Take some case foam, ideally a big bit, load it up with white spirits. You can see there it's left a damp patch. We want it to be a little bit drier than that. We don't want it to be sopping, because we don't want it to take all the oil off. Now in a downward motion, with the damp end, drag downwards against the model. This does two things. It soaks up the excess oil and spirits that we've got on there. It also, thanks to the direction we're going in, pulls it down to give us downward streaks for a more realistic grimy finish. Where all the muck and oil and dirt in their armour has gone downwards as they've been trudging along, killing Xenos scum. So keep going now across all the army. Try not to take too much off, because you don't want to do all the work we've just done. If you do, you can let it dry and then add more, but it's better to get it right the first time. So again, downward direction, take all the excess off. If one end of your sponge is getting a little bit too damp, you can flip it over with a dry end if you've got a particularly stubborn stain on a marine. So again, get all those oils off. Oh, there's too much oil from my sponge. Let me flip the sponge over to hit it with a dry end. That'll soak up all the excess. Probably should be wearing gloves, because hazardous materials, but again, follow instructions on your products from important people who know what they're doing. Yeah, here we go. Let's keep doing this across everybody. So this, instead of, pin washing or brush washing with acrylic washers, it's just easier. And across an army-wide project that we're trying to get done in a day, it's just a no-brainer. Right, let's sup up some marines. Bloody love this dreadnought. So again, same principle, we're going to drag downwards with the damp end to get rid of all the excess on the flat panels. Directional, this will look great because again, it shows that realistic downward streak of dirt and muck. You can get a fresh sponge, get some fresh clean spirits to really get those panels clean and shining how they were, because that's where we lose a lot of that blue we put on in the first phase. However, if you want to go for a more realistic murky look, absolutely go mad, that's what I'm doing. So again, stick with the direction, pull downwards, and let's get this dreadnought looking absolutely fan-bloody-tastic. Ah, my blue boys, look at you. Absolutely wonderful. So, we gave those spirits plenty of time to dry. I recommend an hour. Overnight is ideal, but obviously I don't have overnight because I want to get these guys done. Once that's done, give them an all-over matte varnish. Testers dual coat, or AK Interactive's Ultra Matte, or Army Painters matte varnish. Again, brush, aerosol, airbrush, flavour of choice. And here we have that beautiful matte finish, which you probably can't see it as well on camera. There's a purity seal I missed, goddammit. Yeah, it's a beautiful transition blue. We've got the slight murk and shading from the oil wash. All our transfers look great and tied into the armour. This is probably well over 2/3 of the way there now. Now we're going to do some highlights that we didn't do before because we didn't want them to get lost in the wash. That includes base coating some metallics too. Hitting it back with the Pro Acryl Warm Grey, love it. We're going to use this to dry brush over our Crux Terminatus on our Terminators. So I'm going to get a teeny tiny dry brush, load it up with that warm grey, and I'm going to gently tickle / overbrush all those Crux Terminatus things. Now, as you see, it just brings them out that little bit more, gives them a little bit more presence, which they deserve. They do contain a fragment of the Emperor's armour. As you can see, it does make a difference, so it's definitely worth doing. Doesn't take long, worth the effort, let's go mad. It is Terminator appreciation time. Look at this boy, all ready to go. Oh, so good. Right, back to another boring bit, I'm afraid. We've done all the fun mucky bits, which don't take long at all. We're going to start base coating some metallics. So I'll explain why we've not done this when we get started. So again, Pro Acryl, dark silver, absolutely fantastic colour. Take it for a spin. It's the equivalent to Iron Warriors from Citadel. Really, really nice, really dark, goes on beautifully, thins nicely. We're going to need to do a fair chunk of this across every model, so let's get started. So the reason we didn't do this before we did a load of varnishing and oils and stuff is because as soon as we put a matte varnish on there, we're going to lose a lot of the metallic effects. Which, depending on what you want to go for, painting is a compromise between realism and having something interesting to look at. So realism, when's the last time you saw a Challenger 2 tank with bright gleaming metallic highlights on its tracks and gun? Acid trip maybe. So we do the metallics after our matte varnish because we want them to still shine. We have a very dark model here, granted with a couple of really bright spot colours, but we need the metallics to bring it around in a bit of a balance. So it's really important that we keep a shiny finish on those metallics. Base coating dark silver onto the vents behind the backpack, the underside vents. Never forget the bolt pistol handle because I guarantee I will. The weapons, obviously, I kept the top of the Pyre Blaster free because I'm going to do that a bronzy metallic colour. The Aquila on the chest. Any little odd random pipes and stuff you want to do. Swords as well. Pistols. Yeah, now's the time to get that silver on there. As I mentioned earlier, I'm painting over all the guns with the silver, where we could have done the black casings, but to me there's no point because we're going to dry brush these quite heavily in a bit. So all the casing silver, there we go. Dreadnought, place the silver where you want it. Again, it's quite a dark model, so we're going to brighten the silver up quite nicely, so don't be afraid to compensate with that. So las cannons, the other side of the rocket pods. And then the slightly annoying bit, which is the skeleton of the Redemptor. What is it? Ballistus Dreadnought. Skeleton of the Ballistus Dreadnought. And get those details filled in. Try and avoid the blue where you painted it, but at the end of the day, if you get some silver on it, cool, he's taking a hit, he'll be fine. Wonderful, there's our silver base colours coated in, so now we're going to do some gold. I'm using Viking Gold from Metal and Alchemy as scale colour. Really, really nice, kind of bronzed gold, kind of aged. I wanted this over a bright luminous gold because, again, they're Crimson Fists. They're stoic, they're stubborn, they're not one for flash and primp. They're all about getting the job done and killing aliens and being lad-tastic. So I'm going to use this to paint all the reliquaries and the kind of little fancy details on the stone guard. The trims on the shoulder pads of the characters, and a few details on the Dreadnought. Basically anything that looks remotely kind of antiquated or like a relic, probably worth doing this colour. Hilts on swords and such as well too. Right, it's been a long day, but we're in the home stretch now. So Metal and Alchemy is decayed metal. It's basically like old school Timbits. If you don't have this, Balthasar Gold's fine, Warplock Bronze is fine. Castellax Bronze from GW is really, really nice because it's basically Timbits. But this is a really, really nice colour, give it a go. And again, on the Pyre Blasters, the ends of Melters, any Flamers, the stacks on the back of the Dreadnought, anything that isn't gold or silver is probably going to be this colour by now. Okay, once we've done this and it's all completely dry, we've done all those little details we missed, time to wash those metallics. You can use normal oil. I'm a tremendous fan of Basilicanum Grey Contrast. It shades it nicely, it tones it right down, it takes most of the metallic sheen off it, which means our dry brush will be a little more pungent. The only thing to be aware of, it is quite thick, so you do need to go in there thin and sparingly, but evenly. I coated it over all the metallics, and then when it got to the kind of bronze bits on the flamers, I basically wipe it away with my finger because I don't want to lose those too much. And then we're going to do this all over the Dreadnought skeleton as well. Do be a bit careful here, you don't want to get this Basilicanum Grey on the blue. If you do, quickly wipe it off with your finger. So we did Basilicanum Grey the gold bits, the reliquaries and stuff. We're going to save that for the good old Agraxir shade. So, no finesse, get it on there. Be sure to run it around the trims of the shoulder pads on your characters, as you get that really nice separation between the gold and the armour that they're on, with that nice little brown border. Not sure about this model. It's cool, it's fine, it's interesting, but it just seems to be weirdly placed in this box. Paint-wise, I think I overdid the brown a little bit, but yeah, he'll do. It'll be reet. At this stage I decided I was going to Agraxir shade the purity seals and the parchment bits. I think I took too much of the oil wash off there, but that's fine because we can always just chuck some Agrax on it and just to darken it down and fit it into our model's aesthetic. So yep, just all over, red bits and all, just to give them more of a filthy aesthetic. Time to be brave and paint some eyes. I just grabbed some of the bold Pyrrole Red we had from earlier and dropped a little bit of this into each eye. When that then dried, I tidied up with Cantor Blue wherever I needed to, and then dropped in a tiny dot of Trollslayer Orange. Patience, deep breaths, give it a go, mess it up and tidy up. It's much easier that way than trying to get it perfectly in the eyeball. Eye lens is done. Time to highlight some pouches. I'm just going to use some Mournfang Brown from Citadel. Not very neat, not a lot of finesse. I'm just going to do fine lines around the edges of them. Belt straps included. Those nice little round ones, which I assume contain ammo canisters of some kind, just drop a line straight down them. And then follow along those edges on the ammo pouches like that. Use the side of your brush, make sure it's not too overloaded or too wet. And there you go. None of these on the Terminators, Terminator Captain, Terminator Librarian or Dreadnought. So just the Pyroblasters and the Stern Guard. And the Phobos Lieutenant, who's covered in the damn things. So it didn't actually record when I dry brushed the metallic, so sodding thing. But I used MIG's light metal silver paint. It's a dry brush paint. It's fantastic. I applied this over all the silver bits on the guns, the skeleton of the Dreadnought, and everything. It's a really, really bright, pungent silver. As you can see, it brings it up really, really nicely, considering that was almost like a dark grey because of the Basilicanum we put on there. So yeah, get yourself some of that. And here we are just about there. From here, I'm probably going to highlight the purity seals and do a few bits, paint the gun cases. Whether I do this all before I go to bed and do it all in the day will have to remain to be seen because I'm pretty tired. But let's get a cup of tea and see what happens. Otherwise, I'd say they're looking like pretty handsome lads to me. Right, we're soldering on. Black Legion, we're going to use that as we did for our armour ribbings. We're going to use it for gun cases. Dead easy, load your brush up, carefully fill in the case around the silver that you've already done. And then you can highlight that with a little bit of a warm grey. As you can see, it's dead thin, it flows really, really nicely. So just know where you want to put it and put it there. So all around that bronze bit, I'll take it up to about the halfway point on the bottom segment. Watch his dingers. You can always just pop a bit of red on them to make them read. When you get to things like the assault cannon, you can check the artwork for how you want to do it like that. I went a little bit differently. Likewise, you've got a few bits on the dread, the casings around the las cannon and around the rocket housing, where you can do that. Plenty of references on there. Otherwise, just spitball it and freeball it and see how it goes. Look at them. God, aren't they fantastic? So, I did a few highlights. I did those off film because my phone was playing up, but here we go. I've base coated the bases with Rainy Grey from Scale Colour. Really, really nice colour. It smells a bit funny, but, you know, never mind. Really, really quite thick, but if you thin it down well enough, you can get it on there. I ensured to get this on my model's feet and the lower legs just to tie them in, because when I powder them up, they're going to look the part. Also finished off a few details on my librarian. I did the pipes, I did the little glowing nodules, his book. All with the colours we've used, apart from the axe, which was Ethermatic Blue and Imperial Fist Yellow contrast. So, things to look out for here. The weathering on the fist, I absolutely love. So it's a combination of that Rhinox hide we did earlier, and then I dabbed it with some of the bright silver we did dry brushing the weapons. Again, just giving it that really nice, worn, smacked up look. The Fire Blasters I'm happy with, considering they're a battle line unit. I was debating dry brushing black on the end of the Pyre Blaster. No, they're Inferno guys, aren't they? Furnace Squad with the Pyre Blasters. I was debating dry brushing the end of the barrels black or doing a heat effect. But I decided against it because I think they look fine as they are. And the big, beautiful boy, doesn't he look wonderful? Cold yellow on the ends of the rockets. Otherwise, everything you see I've listed. Viking gold on those little rings on his las cannon. Yeah, absolutely bloody love this boy. As you can see, all that weathering's come out sharp. The transfers look great. It's all tied in. It all looks absolutely immaculate. Unified and wonderful. So all that's left to do is paint a couple of heads and powder the bases and rim them. So I'm using Scale Colours Basic Flesh. Nothing special, I do a couple of coats on the faces of this just to build up a solid colour. Once that's done, I give them a wash of Reichland Flesh Shade, give them a highlight of that basic flesh again. I then do a mix of pale flesh and basic flesh 50-50 for a highlight on the brow, nose and cheeks. Hair colour, I think I just used the Mornfan Brown and the Coal Black I had, with a couple of highlights mixed in for a few random hairdos scattered about the place. The heads for the Terminator, Librarian and the Captain I did on sprue, because I did those using my 5-minute face method, which I will cover in another video because it deserves it, because it's great. So yeah, get these faces painted, then it's time to powder them bases. Here we go. Faces are done. So we've got a Caucasian skin tone, a slightly paler skin tone on the Lieutenant, and a nice dark skin tone for the Terminator Sergeant. Again, the hair, use the browns and the blacks and the greys and stuff you've got at hand. If you want to do some blondes, do a bony brown and go from there. So just these two left to sort. Otherwise, I think they're looking absolutely wicked. I'm really, really happy with how the pair of them have come out. Just need to get their bonces sorted, which I'm going to do again off camera. I'll do a video for those another day. But yes, they'll look good running across the battlefield. Here's the Rainy Grey that I used on the base. Again, Scale Colour needs to sort out their labels because their names rub off dead easily. But yes, this is the colour I used on the bases. I thinned it with some water and just splashed it all over. You can dust with an airbrush and go from there. Once that is all completely dry, we then go on to our pigments. Now, if you've never used these before, they're tremendous fun. I recommend you give it a go. They're super, super useful. Here's what I'm going to be using. It's AK Interactive's City Dust and Light Dust? Yes, that's City Dirt and Light Dust. So, what I do first is I apply the City Dirt. Yeah, City Dirt. And I do this using a long, thin brush. I dab it on, and then I do the same with the Light Dust, but sparingly. So, here's how it works. I absolutely didn't forget to mention we need to dry brush the base first. So we grab some Screaming Skull and a long loose brush, and we dry brush those rocks and sand and a little bit of the cape, a little bit of the feet, just to get them a little bit paler to help our pigments stand out that little bit more when these show through. So yeah, nice dry brush over all these bases, shouldn't take long. So, we get our clean dry brush. Again, it should be a long loose bristle brush like a wash brush. Load up a little bit of that City Dirt, and then gently, like tapping cigarette ash off the end of a cigarette, tap it onto that base. Now, pigments are extremely messy. Be sure to have something down to protect your work surfaces if you care about them. I don't care about mine. More importantly, if you have models underneath this, they are going to get covered in this stuff. So, move them out of the way or work away from those models. If you do get pigment where you don't want it, you can tidy up with a wet brush or the wet end of your finger. When I apply these, some people use pigment fixers and such. I don't, because I find it detracts a lot from what I'm trying to do with these. It takes the dustiness away. And I've yet to come across a scenario where I've not protected them and anything's like it's all rubbed off or come away in my case or anything because we work it in. So, firstly, I don't use any fixer. So, apply this quite generally all over the bases. We're going to use more of this than we are the Light Dust, just because that is a lot stronger than this City Dirt. So obviously our Dreadnought's got a nice big base, so you can be a little bit more liberal with this stuff. Definitely you want to get around his feet and stuff, because we'll work that in quite nicely. Yeah, be sure to get this consistently all over the base. Now when we get to our Light Dust, we're going to take most of the City Dirt off our brush just by dragging it onto a piece of paper. And again, this is a lot more potent than the City Dirt. So you really want to gently just give it a couple of little taps, because it will overpower, it will turn the whole thing a pale colour. Once you've done that over every base, so every base has got some City Dirt and some Light Dust on it. As you can see there, I've got some on his gun holster, so I'm going to wipe it off with a wet finger. Yes, once every base has got the City Dirt and the Light Dust on there, we can now crack on and work it in with our brush. Now time for the fun bit. Once my hand's out of the way, take the brush we've been using to sprinkle it on there and work it into the base. So literally just dig it in, really stipple it into there, catch the feet, catch the legs, make sure you get on the other side of all the rocks and stuff. This binds it to the base, it melds the colours together, and it ties our model into our base beautifully. There is our first Crimson Fist wandering through a wrecked hive city. Some of it splatters up his legs, that's fine, it just looks like where dirt specks have caught him. You can work them in a little bit, but less is more if you're going to start putting this on the model, because it will change the colour and the finish. And just like that, we're going to do that across all our models. Once we've done that, we're going to paint our base rims with coal black from Pro Acryl. Also, the reason there's a slight delay in the model going out of shot and me starting the next one is because when I finish piling the dirt into the model's base, I'll turn it away from my workspace and blow it a little kiss and just go just to blow all the excess pigment off there, just to stop it flying around. Once you've done that, before we paint the base rims, you've got to do this, I swear. Blast your workspace with a hairdryer and give it a good wipe down, because once we start painting these base rims black with our Pro Acryl coal black, we'll put them down, we'll be dead happy, job done, then a breeze will come in or we'll sneeze and all the leftover pigment on our desk will go on our black base rims and we'll have to paint them again. Yes, I know this from experience. So, once you've finished with your pigments completely, put them away, clean your workspace, blast it with a hairdryer, get the excess off there. And then, paint the rims with this beautiful coal black. One lick of paint should do it, unless you get pigment all over them again. And we're done. There we have it, guys. Heads painted, bases rimmed, photoed in the light box. Thank you very, very much for watching. If you stay with me this long, I hugely appreciate it. This is my first lengthy tutorial I've done. Not gonna lie, it was a nightmare. Kept getting in the way of the camera, kept knocking it. I am investing in a better mounting equipment to hold my phone while I do film, because I would like to do more of this. If you enjoyed it, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and all that cringy nonsense we always ask you to do. I'd really appreciate that. If you've got any suggestions of how I can improve, do let me know. Otherwise, follow me on Facebook at The Unrelenting Brush, Insta at The_Unrelenting_Brush. Website is www.unrelentingbrush.co.uk. I'd love to see what you're painting. I want to see what you've done with the Leviathan box set. Again, thank you. Keep kicking ass. Have a wicked day. Peace.